Hey everyone, my name's Connor. I'm an iOS developer, and in today's video, I wanted to talk about everything that I would do as a complete beginner before I started vibe coding an iOS app. So let's get right into it. I'm going to make a few assumptions before we get into it in this video, and it's one, that you have a Mac. For native iOS development, you need an Apple computer. And two is that you have basic computer fluency. So even if you've never touched code before, I'm going to assume you know how to use a computer, install apps, work with the file system and basic things like that before you get into it. So here are the 5 things that I would do before I started vibe coding in 2025 if I wanted to build a native iOS app. When I say native iOS app, I mean in the programming language developed by Apple for Apple platforms, and not something that is cross-platform such as React Native or Flutter, where you can build one code base and have an app on iOS and Android. You might think initially that that is always better. In my experience, that is not always the case. I think that in general, you're going to get a better performing app with native iOS than you would in React Native or Flutter. And then the other pro is that you always have access to the latest frameworks and features in iOS that are available to developers day one that they come out. React Native, you typically have to wait at least a little bit for a library or something to be built to make your project be able to have that feature. One example of those features would be something like widgets or anything that allows your app to surface actions in Spotlight or in the control center, something that's just built into the OS experience. And I also just like working with Swift code better, because although AI can, write 80-90% of your code, there's still instances where you need to kind of dive in, adjust some of the code manually. And I just think Swift is nicer to work with. Now, don't let that intimidate you. I think you, with no code experience, can still 100% vibe code a native iOS app. It just is going to take a little bit of work on your part to prepare to be able to do that successfully. But it's work that I think is very much worthwhile. And with AI, it's easier than ever to kind of get over the learning curve that is building an app. AI can do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. The first thing that I think you should do is learn a little bit of code. Now, you don't need to be a code expert. You don't need to write a whole app manually necessarily, but I think it is good to get familiar with code at a high level. And now I have a few resources that I'll get into that I would do that. The next, I would spend a little bit of time working with AI and learning prompting if you haven't done that already, just to get comfortable and familiar with how AI tools generally work, what the best way to speak to them is so that you get the desired results more often than not. Then we're going to get into setting up your workspace and computer for being able to develop a native iOS app. We're going to talk about finding a support system or a community to lean on, because this is not an easy task, although it may seem that watching people vibe code online, and it seems like they're just typing a bunch of keys into AI or a bunch of letters into AI and printing money. That's easier said than done. And so we'll get into why a support system is important. And the next is, once you've got that out of the way, it's important to pick an idea that you want to build to help you get more familiar with coding. So let's go through step 1 in more detail. Step 1 is learning a little bit of code. Okay, so there are plenty of free resources that you can use to learn a little bit of code. What we're going to want to be learning for the purposes of this video and this video series is Swift and Swift UI. Now, Swift is Apple's language for building on Apple platforms, and Swift UI is a framework or a way of writing Swift that makes it really easy to write the UI level of your code, the user interface, the way your app looks. So this is the languages that we're going to be focusing on. I have a few resources that I would recommend that are completely free that you can check out. The first one being Hacking with Swift. This is by Paul Hudson. He has a really great 100 days of getting familiar with Swift UI. I would definitely recommend this website. The next thing you can check out is Apple has their own tutorials on building a Swift app that I think are really cool. These are not as known as you would expect, but they're really nice to walk through, just getting familiar with the breakdown of code and things like that. So this is another option for you. The next is Code with Chris. Chris has a bunch of really great tutorials. He's got lots of different plans and stuff, but there is a free tier of this, and I really like the way Chris teaches as well, and I think it's a worthwhile thing to check out. So explore these, see what fits your learning style best, and go through with one of those. Now, you might be wondering why I didn't first recommend using AI to learn how to code. And that's because I think you should partially. So there's a little thing that's tricky with writing Swift code with AI, in that it's just not, this is not to scare you, but it's not quite as good as it is with something like React Native or JavaScript or Python. It's really great at Python. But the good news is, and why I feel confident that you can do this with AI and Swift right now, is because it has gotten significantly better. If you would have done this a year ago, I probably would have guided you towards doing something like React Native, because AI was writing really great React Native code then. But now, like with tools like GPT-5 and Claude Sonnet 4, they're a lot better at writing Swift code. Grok is great too. So that is how I would approach learning code. I think you should spend at least a week or two just getting familiar with code, having something functioning, doing it by hand just to understand the basics of strings and different data types and how to get the app to show what you want to show and those sorts of things. If you do want to learn code with AI, the way I would recommend doing it is going over to ChatGPT and using their study mode. Study mode is really, really cool. So you go to the ChatGPT website, more study and learn, and then you would put something in like, I am a beginner and I want to learn how to build an app with Swift UI. And then you kind of enter that, and it's going to walk you through. And this is really nice because it will ask about your learning style, or you can tell it your learning style. And it's going to be tutorials exactly tailored to you. This will help you get at least familiar with the basics and get started on your way there. It is a little bit slow to load, especially with using GPT-5, but I do think it's worth it. I'm going to skip just for the sake of this video. But this is a really cool interactive way. So after you've spent a few weeks learning to code, even if it's just an hour or two a day, just getting a little bit comfortable with some code, then we're going to spend time learning prompting. So this is assuming you have not spent much time with AI, but you're wanting to get into it, get familiar with it. I think it's worth spending a little bit of time learning prompting. Now, you don't need to be a prompting expert, and you don't need to be paying for a very expensive course to do that. Actually, I have an app called Sparka that helps you learn AI prompting. For the purpose of building an app, even just spending some time on YouTube, watching some videos. OpenAI has great resources and prompting guides that are worth reading through on prompting their latest models. Anthropic has really great information too. Both OpenAI and Anthropic have actual dedicated tutorials and classroom modules for learning how to use AI and get the most out of it. And so if you're wanting to get really deep, these are the websites I would go to get really familiar with using all the different AI tools and stuff that are available to you. But I think it's definitely worth reading through a few of these articles and messing around with AI, kind of getting your hands dirty with ChatGPT or Claude to just get familiar with how AI works, how it functions. And so you can refine your skills of getting what you want out of AI. You can even ask AI too, which I think is really cool, similar to how we did ChatGPT study mode. You could ask it to teach you prompting as well as code. And this study mode is a really great way to do that. I would highly recommend it. And then there's, of course, I'm sure hundreds of videos on YouTube about AI prompting and different things like that. So watch a few of those. Don't spend too much time here, but at least, a couple hours just familiarizing yourself with using AI tools. The next is you're going to need to set up your workspace. And so there's a few requirements here. This is assuming you have a Mac. You're going to need to download Xcode for free from the Apple developer website or the Mac App Store. And then you are going to need to create your Apple developer account. And so that is right here. You'll need to create an Apple developer account at developer.apple.com and pay for the $99 a year membership to be an Apple developer. This is so that you can run the app on your phone and actually get it uploaded to the App Store once you've built your first app and submit it to TestFlight. You're going to need that account. And then you'll need your AI coding assistant. And so there's a lot of options here. My personal favorites for coding inside of Xcode are Claude Code and Codex. And if you haven't heard of them before, this is what they look like. So they're just in the terminal. And what you do is you open your project here, and I can make a more in-depth video on this later. But just to get you familiar with the interface, This is Claude Code. And so basically how it works is that you would type in here what you want. So like, I want to build a to-do list app, and then use something like plan mode, and it would make a plan to create that to-do list app. You kind of look it over, make sure it's good, and then go like that. So that's one option. The other option is Cursor. There is a little bit more configuration required to run an iOS app in Cursor, but some people like it because you have the chat interface just right next to your code. And this is a great way to do it. This is just a website that I have, but this is the chat interface over here. So you would, like, I want to build a to-do list app, and go back and forth with there. So that's another option. You can download Cursor. That's free as well. Well, there's a free plan. If you want the most usage, I would recommend paying for a plan. And then the last option, this is not my first recommendation, especially for vibe coding an entire app. There are AI tools inside of Xcode where you'll be primarily have running your code and building your app. You can see the code live, here. They do have AI tools that you can use, but they are not as capable as the other ones. These are a lot newer. They haven't been built out as much. Apple just released AI tools in Xcode just a few weeks ago. And so this is not what I would recommend. It's really nice for quick code changes, but as far as building the whole app goes, this is not the way I would do it personally. But I did want to make you aware that this is an option to you. So going on from there, I would pay for one of these tools. So whatever you like the best, whatever you seem to be most comfortable with, I would pick one and pay for one. Now, probably I wouldn't pay for Claude Code if you're trying to stay a little bit on the cheaper side to get the full use and to be able to build a full app out of Claude Code. I would recommend going on the Max plan, which is more expensive than the $20 a month plan on Cursor or Codex. So Codex is the same thing as Claude Code, like same interface anyway, but it's just OpenAI's ChatGPT's version of their coding assistant. And I think it's great. I've been using it for the past few weeks, and it's probably performs better overall than Claude Code has recently. So, but that's just, that could change. But I would recommend paying $20 a month for Cursor or Codex as your AI coding tool. Once you've got those set up and configured, now you're going to want to find a support system. And this part is really important because coding is hard. It is easier with AI, but to actually go from an idea to a fully functional shipped app and eventually one that's making money, right? It is a lot of work. It's easier said than done. So you're going to want a support system to lean back on, to ask questions, to see what other people are doing, to stay motivated, because I guarantee there are beginners just like you that are doing the same thing and started even just a day or a few weeks ago and are doing this successfully. So you can absolutely do it. I would just find a support system to help you through that. Having an account on X is really great. There's so many vibe coders and developers there, people building in public, sharing everything they're learning as they go. Same thing with Reddit. There's lots of really helpful information in subreddits for vibe coding and building apps that you could join. You can join my community, App Launch Club, where I help anyone that experienced developer or not join, and I walk you through building an app with AI in 14 days. Step by step, so it lays out exactly what you need to do every single day. That's another option. Or there's Slack and Discord, like app developer groups, vibe coder groups that you can join. Just find where you're comfortable, find, people that you can connect with and they're doing the same thing. The one thing I think is really great about this is the Build in Public community is very friendly and very helpful. So don't be afraid to ask questions in any of these communities. I'm guaranteed there's going to be people there to help you out on the days that are hard, when you get stuck, when you're confused about something. I'm sure they've experienced that. I definitely have inside my community and other developers that are building in here. Just find people that are sharing the same journey as you, and it's going to help you get so much further than just doing it on your own. The last thing is, once you've got all that other stuff out of the way, you need to pick an idea, because I think it's most helpful when you're actually building an app and not just doing tutorials the whole time. Like I said, get a little bit familiar with coding, but don't spend like months in tutorials. AI is like eliminated the need for that now. You can learn as you go, because you're going to ask AI to help you build a feature, to build a part of your app, and then you can ask it to explain like what the code is doing, and it will teach you the reason for all the code that it wrote. So you can learn as you go. And it's easiest to do that if you have an app idea, if you have a goal that you're wanting to work towards. If you need help coming up with an idea, if you don't already have one, you can ask AI. Say, hey, I am a beginner and I want to use AI to code an app. Can you give me some ideas of good projects to start? And pick the one that you're most excited about. Or is there a problem that you have, an app that you use that you don't like very much, that you wish was better? Or an app that you think would solve a problem that you have in your day-to-day life? That's also a great option for building your first app, because you'll be excited to build that and solve the problem. Pick something that appears more simple. I think that's going to be easier. You're not going to want to build an Instagram per se, or a TikTok, or a super involved game, but build something that pushes you a little bit out of your comfort zone, but is at least exciting to you. The next thing you could do is copy an app. Find an app you like and just copy it with AI, because it's going to get you familiar with the tools, familiar with code, and the experience of vibe coding. If you have an app that you love that's not too complex, but still relatively simple, just copy it, just rebuild it. I think that's a great way just to get your hands dirty and get familiar with vibe coding and the entire process. So that is everything that I would do in 2025 before I started vibe coding if I had no prior experience. These steps right here are going to be really helpful in just getting you prepared and familiar with the vibe coding process, and give you at least a baseline that you need to successfully build an app. That's everything in this video. We'll see you in the next one when we actually start building an app. I'm going to walk you through building an app day by day in 14 days, vibe coding the whole thing, and everything I do in that approach. Thanks. We'll see you in the next one.